right, ladies and gents, welcome back to Blue Grit Radio. For the first time, we're going to have multiple guests. So I got a return of Clay. If you've listened to the older episode, Clay, man, I feel like I could spend probably a long time introducing you, but in a nutshell, you're a veteran, you're a family man, you are a corporate professional, and you are a BJJ and nonprofit passionate trainer. You know, you're working with vets and cops and general public, you know, just training, fitness training. Remind me, Gorilla.
Oh, Mindful Gorillas. That's just
Mindful Gorillas. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like a blog. It's like my
That's
blog.
That's you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool, man. And we got his buddy, Adam. Adam, say hello.
Hello, everybody.
And Adam's a cop.
That is a fact.
And you've been in law enforcement for how long?
Just shy of 13 years.
Right on. Very cool. So after I talked to Clay, and probably even before we talked, you're like, man, I got to get my dude Adam on here. We gotta have some conversations about jiu-jitsu, defensive tactics, just training in general, law enforcement, the whole thing. So here we are, weeks after when we originally intended to schedule, but as you may imagine, 3 busy guys across the nation with competing schedules, even in their own individual lives. I'm glad we're able to get together finally.
Absolutely.
Yeah, me too. It's good to drag Adam on here so he can meet him. That's had numerous conversations in the parking lot that probably last longer than our family would like for it to. But no, it's good to get him on. Yeah.
Oh, you just get caught up sometimes. That happens.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm a big talker anyway, and you find somebody that's got like-minded individuals. You know, you have some really good, deep, in-depth conversations about things and stuff. So yeah, it's definitely been good.
So Adam, what's your current assignment, and what did you do before law enforcement?
Well, so currently, as like a couple weeks ago, reassigned as a school resource officer.
Nice.
Albedo High School. This is my second time being a resource officer. I was a resource officer at a local area middle school for about a year and a half. So, let's see. I guess I'm getting on later into my career, I guess, when I'm going back to the schools. But before that, I was pretty much worked patrol the majority of my career. I've been on few different SWAT teams, currently on our department SWAT team, and kind of but I was a supervisor at a couple of different agencies, and did that on the frontline level and things like that. So before I was a police officer, I was just a regular guy. Started when I was 21. I was working at Lowe's and doing like retail work and things like that, and ended up start out in corrections, and did that for a couple years, and then moved on to patrol. Nice. It's not like it is now. Like 13 years ago, at least in Southwest Virginia, getting hired on in police work, like
for sure,
you'd have 200 people apply for one position, and so if you weren't already certified or didn't know somebody, pretty much, you had to start somewhere. So I started in the jail doing that, and things, to kind of work my way progressively to where I'm at now. So.
Nice. And Clay, when did you guys meet, and where?
I think I've been training at Team Manning Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, the Renzo Gracie Academy in Blacksburg, for 5 years. I think I've been going there, maybe longer, but I would say comfortably five years or so, and that's where Adam and I met. He's smashed me around the mats on more than one occasion, so that's where we met. Was at the
I got about 100 pounds on Clay, so that helps.
Science is science. Physics, math can be helpful if you know what to do with it, especially.
That's right. Yeah, no, I think that's right. I remember the first time I saw Clay, he came in for I think it was like a Wednesday night kickboxing class, and I only had like a jiu-jitsu class right after that,
Mm-hmm.
and things. And I will say I do remember. I don't know if you remember this. We were doing skip knees on the wall, and I remember Clay was like right next to me. I was right here dying, and he's like, "Keep going, big dog, keep going." I was like, "Okay, cool. We're gonna keep going." So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's like my first like vivid memory of Clay.
Nice. And what was your introduction to martial arts or BJJ, Adam?
Uh, Hold on one second. I got a couple of things. Hold on one second. What up, dog? Huh? I know. See you, dog.
What
Anyway,
did you do? What did you do?
nah, it's the next town over. He's like, "Hey man, you in the
Oh,
wrong burg."
oh,
Nah,
that's so
I know
good.
him. I know him from years ago. Anyway,
Nice.
um, sorry. So I got into Brazilian Jiu Jitsu back in 2015, and I'd already been into law enforcement for some time there, and really, the reason I got into it was I knew it was a very effective form of martial arts. I had wrestled in high school and
Mm,
things, and so I understand the power of grappling. And I was on my first SWAT team there, and in my mind, I'd spent all this time, you know, practicing firearm skills and things like that, and I just felt like I was incomplete. I needed that other aspect to be like the complete, SWAT operator. I needed to be good with my
mm,
hands and lethal with a gun and lethal with my hands. And there's nothing like that besides jiu-jitsu, you know. So I got into it, and that's really kind of what prompted me into it. I fell in love with it, and I mean, I guess we can go into this later on too. But I mean, it's helped me out so many times throughout my career, not just physically, but also mentally. Probably more so mentally, actually,
yeah.
and things. But yeah, that's really the main thing that prompted me into it was, hey, I need to. If I'm gonna, it's one thing to be in shape. It's one thing to be strong. It's one thing to be fast. It's one thing to be confident and accurate with a weapon. And it's a completely different thing to be confident with your hands too. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to be. I set out my goal to be the best police officer I could be and the best SWAT operator I could be. And I knew there's no way I could even come close to that if I wasn't doing jiu-jitsu as part of my regiment.
Yeah. I love that you got into it early on, and that's why when I have the ability to, well, one through formats like this and social media, but otherwise with my own actual recruits that I hire on, is just to say, hey, I'm in my late 30s and I'm just getting started, and I'm humbled every time I get on the mat, and it's fun, and sometimes it's not so fun. I'll be honest, like I'm not one of those, every time I want to go and I want to be there every day. Like, no, there's sometimes I got excuses and I have to get
Mm-hmm.
over them, or life gets in the way, and I do feel guilty. So I'm like, okay, I have to go tomorrow. And luckily, talk to my
Yeah.
wife and, we get it all figured out. But no, it's super humbling. It's not fun to be bad at something. But,
Mm-mm.
and I'd love to bounce off with both of you guys. But, from my patrol experience, 14 years on the street and having no jujitsu, just your typical training, which is probably actually a lot more than the national average, but not a
Mm-hmm.
lot at all.
Right.
Yeah, I'm just relying on my my grip strength from deadlifting to
Yeah.
wrestle someone, and I'm relying on my relatively good strength for my body mass, but no technique, right? And it's not effective,
Mm-hmm.
and strikes are not effective. When you're dealing with someone that's high or extremely extremely motivated, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Adrenaline helps both ends out, but yeah, so I could say honestly that I wish that I had just an inkling of that through my whole career.
Yeah.
And who could, to only imagine what if I'd been, rolling, let's just say a couple times a month or a few times a month for 14 years. Like that'd be
Yeah.
fantastic. So I try to urge everyone to go, whatever they can do.
Yeah. I agree with you 100% on that. When I went to the academy, conditioning was important, but they really emphasized, like my training coordinator in particular. I mean, he was a stud, and he wrestled. He was a state champion wrestler and things, and he was just like, you big out there. If you're out there big and strong, and you grab a hold of somebody, you let them know what's up. They're not going to. And there was some truth to that. It's not an absolute truth though. So like I remember getting out of the academy, and I worked at kind of a meathead department when I got out. And
Sounds fun.
man, I could tell you some stories. Some of those, no way I could put that out in open forum.
You
But
can tell me
anyway,
some, and you can't tell me some.
yeah, that's right. But it was all about being like as big and as intimidating and strong as you could be. And I'm trying to remember at the time when Clay met me. I may have gotten out of that phase because I think I'd already. I mean, I was much bigger and stronger then than I am now by far. And I remember my first class I came in and this little blue belt girl was maybe 135, 40 pounds, maybe. And I'm probably overestimating her weight actually. She she choked me out. There was nothing I wasn't going like super hard to begin with, right? Because I don't want to be that guy. But when she got that choke on me, I was like, no, I'm getting her off of me. And I couldn't do anything. And I remember thinking, I was like, man, all this strength for what? You know, for my joints hurt and all this, and this little girl who's a little blue belt is just destroying me.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like I said, I think the same thing, just relying on strength and size and some aggression, but it only gets you so far. You get, there's plenty of situations where I've been in where that wouldn't have been enough.
Yeah, I'm curious, Clay, your perspective's going off of that because you have, an athletic and strength, dynamic strength training background and expertise as well. Yeah, how do you think people, first responders, should intermix all that?
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, I train a lot of different law enforcement. Adam was kind of a part of that as well. We started up this project to get law enforcement to come and train. But the one thing that they say the most often that is the most helpful, those that stick to it, because not a lot of people stick with it, is that you don't really realize the kind of conditioning that a grappling situation will provide you. It's a different kind of experience that it's very foreign to someone that's never done it. And if you're a police officer and you find yourself in that situation, you're going to be smoked and you are not going to know what to do. And you will learn very quickly that 4 minutes can seem like an hour.
Yeah.
And if you're in, you guys have the experience with, I like the way you put it, Eric, with working with motivated individuals.
Highly motivated
individuals. If you don't know that reality of how to manage yourself and your energy and another person, it doesn't matter if you can run 50 miles. It doesn't matter if you can deadlift 300 pounds. They're not saying that those things aren't useful, because they are useful, but you won't be as successful in those situations until you've experienced what it's like to grapple with another human being in a real way. So that's kind of my biggest takeaway, is you have to do what they call stress inoculation, especially if your life is dependent on it. With, if you walk around with a firearm, it's your obligation to everyone around you to be able to handle yourself, and that's just kind of, and again, I say that as a veteran, not as law enforcement, because I'm not law enforcement. So take that with a grain of salt. So, I say that very carefully, but it makes sense. It makes sense.
No, I think I appreciate you saying it, because I think we need to be mindful. Like, we should take feedback from everybody. And I'm not talking about like the peanut gallery. I'm talking about just this common sense, right? You're not speaking from nothing, but yeah, if you're carrying a firearm, that's part of your job to be effective using it, or it's part of your job to be able to take away someone's rights physically and overpower them should they not want to. But also, you're carrying that around. You have to be able to confidently and competently retain that, right? If you find yourself on your back, that can't be game over, and someone's trying to rip away your belt. You can't be like, well, this person's bigger, stronger. Then you either have to have the a combination of the resolve, the mental and physical strength, and the technique to retain it and then handle business. So I appreciate you saying it, and I think that too often, I mean, we see examples, and through the years, everyone's seen iconic ones if you've been through police training, but too often we see a very overinflated confidence, of officer or officers going to something that they were not prepared for mentally, physically, or otherwise. Thoughts, Adam?
I agree 100%. I think that, kind of touch on what Clay said about, being in shape, and then it's different. It's hard to replicate, putting hands on another person. I recently started teaching a local CrossFit gym. I would teach them jujitsu. In exchange, I go there and work out with them and things. These guys are absolutely killing me in these workouts. I mean, it's like it's horrible. They are just studs, and like the top of their game, because I'm teaching just the coaches, and they come in and I have them set out and do 2-minute rounds, and they're like, "What is happening? Like, this is just completely different."
Yeah.
It's hard to replicate that. In the, like, kind of what Clay was saying about the inoculation, there's something primal about rolling with somebody and doing jujitsu. There's something primal about someone putting their arm around your neck and squeezing. It is, even though that they're, it's not a real fight, you're just rolling. Subconsciously, that's a life or death situation. It triggers all those same, stress responses, and that drains your energy like crazy. And I think when you become a police officer and things, you have to live to a higher level of standards. I understand we're all humans. I agree with that, and I think it's good to humanize the badge and for people to see that. But at the same time, I think once you do it, you're supposed to be like pillar of the community. You should be top of your game as far as fitness and being able to handle yourselves, and it's you have to be, your standard of living has to be higher. You can't just be. You don't want to be a liability. You know what I mean? It changes things. You can't just be. I can't just be Adam. I have to be a little bit more than that. Whether that's fair or not, I don't know if that's necessarily the case. But like, especially with the the job performance part. If you're somebody who's always struggling to hit a 70 on a qualification course just to pass, well, you might be more of a liability than you are an asset to that community. If you're somebody who can barely meet your minimum PT score for whatever, whether it's to get onto a specialty team, whether that's your initial entrance into that job, or if your department does annual testing, whatever, maybe you're more of a liability than an asset to it. And it goes the same thing with jiu-jitsu and putting hands on people. If you're somebody who can't pull it together and do what needs to be done and handle yourself physically, or isn't taking the steps to get better at that, at what point do you become a liability?
Yeah, absolutely. That conditioning is no joke. I can count. I can count off a bunch of times where if I didn't have a printout of the call, with our radio transmissions and the time when I'm out with one, oh, he's fighting, oh,
Mm-hmm.
and then it scuffles and all that, and then to the point where a dispatcher annotates one in custody, I would have thought, whether it's me and a buddy or 2 people or 4 cops, right, wrestling,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes a huge dude, sometimes a tiny scrappy dude that's high on who
Mm-hmm.
knows what. I would have bet money that, especially earlier in my career before I really knew, I would have bet money that some of them were 4 to 8 minute fights. But
Right.
a lot of times, those struggles and just literally grappling matches, luckily a lot of times not anything worse than that. Yeah, they sometimes are like 30 seconds, a minute 20.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really humbling when you to speak to the CrossFit, right? And
Yeah.
if you do these circuit style workouts and you're doing these very masochistic things like slamming balls and going right into
Yeah.
assault bike and
Yeah.
then doing pull-ups and then running around the building, that's not easy. No joke. Like, it's legit fitness, but it's very different from doing
Absolutely.
a couple minutes on the mat with somebody.
Absolutely. I agree 100%.
Yeah, I think when you tie it all together, they're going back to my statement about the firearm is that the similarities between the military and law enforcement is that it truly is, anytime your main goal is to protect and serve, like, you're automatically placing yourself in the to have the responsibility to be, as Adam was saying, a little bit better than the average Joe. Like, you're making sure that you're able to protect and able to serve. And it's very relevant too with the military, because that's essentially what we're tasked to go. When I was in Afghanistan, we were literally called the International Security Assistance Force, ISAF. So it's the same concept of, you should be a warrior athlete, a professional athlete for the task that's at hand. And, obviously that's not going to happen for older gentlemen, especially like in law enforcement, but it's a warrior culture, and you're a part of that warrior culture because you're assigned to protect and serve. So that comes with the responsibility of being able to manage yourself and, the weapon that you have at your side. And I think that's important. I think it's important to distinguish that, because I guess it's less of like a condescension and more of a call to be proud of that service, but also take it seriously if you can, because it matters. You should look at yourself as a little bit above the everyday person. You should strive for that, like Adam was saying.
Yeah, absolutely. I was trying to look up without being too distracted. I just saw this TED Talk. Are you guys familiar with Master Shi Hung Yi?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I have heard him.
Yeah, so I'll try to remember to put this in the show notes. But he's got a couple TED Talks, but he speaks to the, how people have gotten weak, right? And people need to be strong. And he talks about training and physical training and martial arts, and he's like, it's not about, to summarize and paraphrase a lot of it, it's not about the physical strength. And I think he's talking generally, right? But he's like, it's about being able to move through the discomfort, right? So you can think about Goggins, you can think about all these, kind of pillars of what the human body is capable of because of the human mindset. But he's saying, like, you're going to encounter difficulty in your life. And he even, brings an anecdote to, he's like, do you think that Paleolithic cave people had depression? No, they're too busy moving around, just living life. They're not sitting like stewing and vacant and then coming up with issues. They're busy, they're moving. And then he talks about the Spartans. He's like, do you think that they have anxiety and they have depression and they, all these other issues? And just to say that they're moving, and they took especially that culture took so much pride in being highly capable and able to protect their own, able to care for their own, and stand up for themselves, right? And so I think that we could gain a lot outside of even first responder culture and military culture, just to say, hey, if you do these difficult things, if you do these uncomfortable things, if there's a 200-300 pound guy on top of you and you're trying to breathe past his gi collar, I mean, that's going to prepare you for the hard day at work, even in your cubicle. Like, truly, it's just going to make you more resilient. It's going to make you more adaptable and keep your cool and manage your stress. And it doesn't have to be these things. I mean, I think that some people listening in, even whether they're cops or not, might think, man, I'm just not that type. Well, do something, right? Maybe you, when you do go to your in-service training, you say, hey, I'm going to put my 100% into this, and I'm going to try to do a couple extra hours with the DT instructors. Maybe I'm not going to join a gym. I would highly encourage people to do that, but maybe you're not going to sling weights around all the time. But if you're not active the majority of days of the week, I highly encourage you start somewhere, because I acknowledge this could seem really intimidating for those that are very resigned into their sedentary lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I mean, it boils down to So when we say warrior, everyone wants, or at least in my day, it was like Conan, Arnold, and it was Chuck Norris or Sylvester Stallone coming out of the water, and he's like jacked and ripped. But honestly, like being a warrior is just willfully facing adversity, like by choice. It's anyone who's willing to seek out adversity on their own accord is could be considered, in my opinion, a warrior. That's the thing about jujitsu, not to keep harping on the jujitsu thing, is that every single person in there is going in there to willfully face the uncomfortable and also their ego. And that is what you would want. Even if you're not the greatest physical specimen, you should be comfortable facing adversity and choosing it and not waiting for it to happen to you. And I think that's an important concept, in that whole dichotomy of, when we say warrior or when we say go do jiu-jitsu or we say go like fitness is the ability to adapt. It's not necessarily being the Adonis of the room. And training your mind as well as your body to adapt, I think is what Master Chi is kind of saying in that aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. So Adam, with your time in law enforcement and then time training, what have you found is helpful to encourage those to train or train more?
Peer pressure. So
it can be helpful. It can be a helpful tool for sure.
Yeah, it is. Look, and we're talking. If we're talking about training, if we're talking about specifically training in like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu,
all the training.
Well, so firearms is a little bit easier to get people to go to, but there's still a lot of people that want to bitch and moan about that. And I don't want to go to the range. We just qualified last night, and about I don't know, 30% were probably just. I mean, they were there because they obviously because they had to be. And
yeah, there's plenty. There's plenty. I think it's all. Yeah. I think it's every department. There's plenty that would.
Yeah.
I mean, there's plenty that say you're paying me to do this. This is pinch me. Yeah. But then, like anything, there's going to be plenty that if you didn't make them qualify, they wouldn't.
Exactly. So I feel like that's a little bit easier. The being physically fit, I think that is harder to get people to sell on than firearms. But that's kind of a culture thing too. Like if your department heads and things really push that and they value that and they live that, then getting people to get on board, that's a lot easier. Leadership is everything. In any industry or profession or organization, leadership is everything. That's that. Getting people to train in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, that's a tricky one. It is an intimidating thing. I was probably about 275, then real big, strong dude, lifting, just powerlifting, all that other stuff. And, so, and I'd wrestled. So I was like, well, maybe I'll go in there and if I won't do too bad and things. And, but, I got my ego checked pretty quick. But it is intimidating. There's still some intimidating part about, going in here and getting, beat up or what have you, for lack of a better word. And so what I've been trying to do the last little bit is, when I first started trying to get other officers to do jiu-jitsu, I was like, come on, man. And I thought, I need to go in here and fuck them up so they know that it's real. That was like the mindset, right? Let me go in here. Let me just put it on them, and that way they understand. This way I understood of, oh my gosh, this is. I didn't realize I was this helpless, right? You don't really get too many people that way. That's what I found out. So, what has seemed to work the best is, like I said, encouraging peer pressure. Hey man, you want to come train? You want to come do this? We're gonna come do this. Let me just come here, whatever.
Friendly challenge.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
yeah. Make it, hey, don't worry, I'm there. It ain't no big deal. And then, so getting them there is the hard part. Once they're there, if you do it right, it's not as bad. So, what I've learned is, especially beginning, the least you actually roll, the higher percentage you'll have of people coming back. So if I have somebody come in, for department training or anything like that, hey, we're going to work on trap and roll mount escape and maybe like stage 1 of punch block series, maybe go to stage 3, whatever. We're going to go from there. And we're just going to drill the moves. I'm going to show you some things. We're going to let you go back and forth like that. Nobody's getting into a dick measuring contest because that'll happen really quick. Especially you get a couple alpha guys together and they want to. One gets the better of the other, like, oh no, I'm gonna get you, and then that's the thing. And
then we call them blue forms, but basically injury on duty forms start flying out.
Oh yeah,
no one
exactly.
needs that.
Yeah,
try to mitigate that.
Exactly, and the department heads are obviously super worried about that because staffing's already low. They don't want anyone to get hurt. I understand that. Mm-hmm. So at the end of it, people leave, and hopefully they have the feeling of, and this has been my experience, hey, I felt like I learned something today. Whereas before, I didn't really learn anything. I just got my ass kicked.
Yeah.
And when it takes away some of the threatening part, you really have cops generally have big egos. I was the same way. And if you're not cognizant of that, it's really easy to hurt someone's ego, and then they'll shut down and not want to come back. So what I found is just trying to constantly stay on people in a friendly way, not be like, oh, you don't come here, pussy, none of that. Just come on, man, it'll be a good time, we'll have some fun, we'll go get some ice cream after, whatever, just like I do with my kid. Hey, you come to jiu-jitsu, I get some, making something positive with it. But and then just teaching them something that they actually can see, oh yeah, this does work, and not having them walk out beaten up and disheartened. And I really learned that kind of mindset really from dog training when I was a canine handler. Always ending on a positive note, always making sure everything's fun.
Reinforcement,
Exactly. And it's still not where it should be, but I've had much better results with that, of getting people to buy into it and want to keep coming back.
Yeah. What I hear is meeting them where they're at, and you have to know your audience, right? And so if you're around someone that's, a high achiever and has a chip on their shoulder, and they're maybe they're not doing this, but they're hungry to better themselves, you can throw them a challenge, right? You can challenge their ego a little bit, right? But what I heard in the first example, which was, if you shut them down, and hopefully at the time you were thinking that you create this very sobering experience where hey, you want to go home to your family? Do you want to go home? You want to be able to walk and do this job for a few more years. But that ego can be so fragile, right? And that could just shut people down. But if we want to train them and we want them to stay positive and engaged, then maybe there's a different note. So I'm glad you hit on that point, because I think we do see a lot of that generationally, especially, we're hiring a different generation now, and their motivators are different. Their ways of communicating are different. And we can either dig our heels in and push them away and repel them, or we can try to adapt some of our methods, to help have them be, effective.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts, Clay? Because you worked in fitness for quite a while. It's almost like if you had someone that had the vulnerability to say, "Hey, Clay, you're a big jack dude. I want to be big and jacked, but I'm carrying an extra 70 pounds, and I haven't run around the block in years." And you're like, "All right, cool. I'm going to put you on the salt bike, and then we're going to do burpees and squats until you puke." It's almost like that, right? Where maybe too much right on the front end. How do you manage that?
Yeah, I don't really know. I was hoping to get you two on here, and you could let me know why it's so hard to get police officers to do jiu-jitsu. No, I think Adam kind of hit on a little bit of it's. I wouldn't say that cops have big egos, because I don't want to get pulled over. But
we're stubborn. I'm gonna say we're stubborn.
I mean, let's be honest. Clay knows all of them around his area anyway. He's fine.
Yeah,
that's the advantage of living in a small town. Everybody knows everybody.
So, yeah, I think Adam's onto it. For me, I think one thing that I try to push, and it may not be great either, is back to the gun thing, or if you carry it and you live and you wake up and you go to sleep and there's the implication of life or death, and it's very, very similar to military lifestyle, post-military lifestyle, then the sell to me is the community of people that you're going to get. And it would be the same for the person that has never made it around the block. It's, join a CrossFit gym, not because you want to be jacked or better, but because of the community of people that will help you reach your goals, because it is going to be hard. It is going to be difficult. It is going to be uncomfortable. I've been doing jiu-jitsu for a long time, and there are still days and weeks that I don't go. And when I do start to go back, it's like I'm nervous again, and I got to show up again. And, what are they going to think, and how is this going to be? But the community aspect of accountability would be the hard sell, because that requires consistency on the person's end. But that's kind of my approach in some degree for some of these guys. But I think Adam's kind of right, and you are as well, where I think that will only work on people who have already made the decision to make the change. I don't know that it will work on someone that's still ambivalent to it at all,
Yeah.
So maybe a nicer method, like you were saying, both of you guys, of like, come on, get you, we'll hang out. It'll be cool. We won't do anything hard, and you'll just learn something. And walking away feeling like they've learned something is an incredible method, Adam, that will, I think I'll try to take that and use it myself. Is like, hey, I want this person, even if it's physical fitness, to walk away at least feeling like they learned something. That's huge. That's a good point.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and from a firearms perspective, as maybe the most digestible version, because it is so regimented in training. In law enforcement, you have to qual. I think any good firearm instructor, and I'm not one. I'm just paying some credit to some good ones I've interacted with, which is, end on the good note, right? I've been a dog trainer. Right? I've worked with my canine, but yeah, you have to, psychologically, it's so different to remind someone, even a creature, right? Like, hey, good job. All right, let's put you away, right? Good boy, right? Put it back in the car. So you're like, at the end of the day, like, dogs are so in the moment. They're like, okay, that was fun.
Yeah.
So if you're a good instructor in whatever vein, maybe it's report writing, maybe it's driving, you're like, hey, had some hiccups. I saw right away, like, you're plugged in. You throw them a bone for the things that they're doing right, and you end with a positive rep, and then you praise them up, right? So when they leave on their way home, they're like, okay, I made I gained some ground, right? And then
they feel good about it.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that comes up a lot in this podcast, specifically like field training, which is, hey, we can beat them up. They're new, and man, a 3-year officer could beat up a 1-year officer, and a 10-year officer could beat up a 3-year officer. But what does that get you? Can do you want to mentor them and coach them, or do you want to just pick them apart? We just got to remember that, because we have such a staffing need in law enforcement. So finally, you got people that are willing to do the thing. They pass all the standards, and then they come in, and then you just tell them everything that's wrong with them. Like, what are we doing? But that makes me want to pivot over to leadership, and you guys were talking about it earlier. But yeah, I think that if you have those, if any leaders are tuning in, but for sure some, future leaders or, up and coming leaders, if this is a priority for you, it probably is, if you're following along with what kind of things I have to say and who I have coming on and what you all have to say, then you recognize the need, and you can be that type, right? You can be that, hey, I'm going to a desk duty, but you'll see me in the gym, because it's still part of the job. It's still part of the obligation. And I'm still not, I'm not going to slack. I'm not going to let these pillars fall in my lifestyle. But man, it's so impactful when I see, chiefs, sheriffs running 5Ks for charity. I'm like, okay, cool. Because there's a lot of, line level cops that aren't going to do it. Or you see people that guys and gals clearly take care of themselves, right? They look like I wouldn't mess around with them, or they look like they could run laps around me, especially as they age and they grow in tenure and seniority or rank. I think that's a huge, just presence and way to lead from the in a very apparent, visible way.
Absolutely.
There's a nearby department that the training sergeant is also like a wellness sergeant, but he wasn't able to get buy-in for department supported jiu-jitsu because of the safety aspect and the injury risk. But what he was able to get it signed off on was wellness. He's like, hey, this is legitimately hard exercise, or it can be. It's going to work on someone's cardio. It's going to work on their mobility, so their likelihood to get injured is lower. If as long as you're not, like you said, rolling hard all the time. When trainers know how to mitigate that, and then it's also stress relief. So he packaged it like that, and then he was able to get his chief to buy off on, a local professor or coach to come in, a couple times a week or a couple times a month. And I'm like, man, kudos to you. Like, I got to keep working on that. But I love when people think outside the box is how to make that, what we might see as decently low hanging fruit even more accessible.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you. And like I said, talk about buying, especially if you get like someone that's up at the top, it's easier to get them to try to implement things like our department, they let us work out an hour on a per shift. If you're like a Monday through Friday guy, they give you like an hour 3 times a week that they'll pay you to come out and do. They incentivize you for that, and they let people do things like that and pay you for it and stuff like that. And I know another agency, at least their SWAT team guys get like an additional 8 hours of compensatory time each month for physical fitness and things like that, and incentivize some of that. I think Virginia State Police, I think part of your PT score factors into your eval. So it kind of depends on. So there's definitely ways to get that, and like I said, yeah, definitely the more buy-in you have with it, like, and talk about like the jiu-jitsu aspect of it. The department I'm in now, one of the lieutenants who's over the investigations division is also the like senior defensive tactics instructor for our regional academy. So that's how we do it. Like a regional academy that services like 10, 12, 15 different agencies, and he's high up enough now, and he's bought into it that he's able to make some really good changes and things. Matter of fact, before I got on with you guys, he and I were down. He got mats for the department and everything. We were down there working on some Kimuras and going to a handcuffing position from there and things like that. So, but if it wasn't for him being in that position, him being open-minded, having leadership, and being able to get things going like that, that just probably wouldn't be happening. I think that's what's happened. Not all agencies, but a lot of them. So.
Yeah, but I think that's huge. Just from the other side of the country, I pay note, and I think that others would just take note. This you said detective lieutenant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, a lot of people would probably conceive that person doesn't need to put hands on a lot of people. Mm-hmm. He's got the rank. He's working it's a lot. It's a really managerial job, really administrative focused.
It's 100% light duty. 100%.
Yeah, so it's and like, not to disparage admin, like there's a lot of stress, and that's why a lot of people don't want to promote too. But it's a different job, right? You're not on your feet. Oftentimes, you get sucked in your desk, and I think anyone that's Clay working on a computer all the time, right? You can get sucked into that. But yeah, what a statement to be like, hey, I'm still the resource. I'm still the person beating the drum for this very important part of this job, even though he's not out in the field a whole lot.
Yeah, and he's got some unique experiences too. Our agency, which I guess people they want to figure out. I'm not figure it out. I search, probably Google my name and find it. But we've had 2 police officers that were killed with their own weapons.
Mm.
And back in the mid 90s and early 2000s, and he was really close to him, especially one in particular. And he's made that a very important part of the defense. He wants to make sure that people are aware of that and things. And our department has learned that lesson the hard way. And we don't want to make that mistake again. So we that is one thing too that out of something that's some tragedies that we've been able to really reinforce some of these other aspects. And this is not. I want to make sure I say this. It's not talking trash about either of those officers. They're heroes and much greater men than I'll ever be. And a lot of the issues that happened with that wasn't necessarily training wise. There were some equipment issues and things like that. But this stuff happens. We had an officer in Virginia not too long ago, just a couple, maybe 6 weeks ago now, maybe in Wintergreen, who got into a scuffle with a subject and was killed with his own service weapon. And here it is, 2023, and retention holsters are completely on a whole other level than what they used to be. So, it's one of those things that it's like I said, we've learned the lesson the hard way, and they take it seriously. And like I said, we're fortunate that he is, in particular, has moved up in ranks and things, and has made sure to make that a really strong change. So
yeah, no, that's good. You got to put people in the right seats, and leaders got to lead. You have to have people demonstrating the qualities that you want, right? If you want cops that are focused on safety and training and fitness and compassion and patience and investigations and doing thorough hard work, like you need to promote the people that are doing that,
right.
and show importance in that. That's just leadership. So no, and I appreciate bringing that up. I'm sorry for your department's loss, and
Appreciate
it's
it.
certainly, we need to talk about these things because, it's not about, placing judgment or pointing fingers. It's about, hey, this terrible thing or these terrible things have happened. We need to be able to debrief and assess and, after action, so we can not have to repeat those things and we can learn from them.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, even when no one's hurt, even when it just kind of seems embarrassing, and say, hey, we watch video from across the nation so that we can say, hey, let's pause it here. What would our training inform us? If this happened in our city, what would you do next, right? And, officers peer level and supervisors need to be able to do that.
Right. Absolutely.
All right. Well, I want to be mindful of your time, guys. So I guess in summary, what are some big things that, and I'll start with Clay, as far as, all your interaction, training, not just BJJ and defensive tactics, but also, strength conditioning. What are some of the big rocks that you'd want people to focus on, whether they're coming into the career or whether they're, halfway and they're like, man, I gut check, I need to get a little better?
Let's see. So what would I say to someone that just wants to get better in fitness, jiu-jitsu, as a law enforcement, or just in general?
Yeah, we could do either way or both.
I would say be just allow yourself to fail, and fail often, and fail early, and be comfortable failing. You're gonna fail at what you do, and you would rather I would rather fail at my fitness pursuits and my jiu-jitsu pursuits with someone like Adam, who is going to tell me where I went wrong, tell me how to get better, as opposed to waiting in the fitness realm until I have a health issue, or in the law enforcement realm until it's real and it's on the street. Fail early, fail often, and don't let that be what causes you to stop.
Excellent. Adam, how about you?
So I guess kind of the main question was like, what do we need to see in ourselves to kind of spur us to getting to go there? Go to the next officer's funeral. That's all I need to do. You go there and realize that, this is it's not a game out here. This is life and death. And I try to go to every one that I can. If it's somewhere that the department will send me and things, locally, whether even if it's on my day off, that's, I kind of prefer to be on my day off anyway, but just I go there and I think about it, and I see the family, I see all that other stuff, and I realize, I have 2 kids, one on the way, I have a wife, I have my retired dog who's who, while he's a big old ass eater, absolutely likes me, and things. There's people that count and rely and depend on me to get home, and just not only do I owe it to the people I work with, be the best that I can, because they're, and not going into too many details, but we've had situations over here as well where an officer was killed with another officer's gun. I owe it to, like I said, I'm not talking shit about anybody, but we owe it to ourselves and our other officers as well to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to try to be better than we were the day before. We owe it to our families to do the same thing. And, for me, I'm kind of a weird guy in general, but those reality checks are important. I've hit levels of complacency throughout my career at times. One time in particular, luckily I trained enough to kind of prepare for all that, but it's the real thing, and you got to take it seriously and understand what it is. And we have a 3-gun school around here that the county puts on, and one of the sayings they have is, if you knew you were going to be in the fight for your life tomorrow, would you have trained harder today? And just having that reality check, because I think, growing up in a small rural area where not as much stuff happens and things, kind of like a Mayberry, if you will. A lot of people like, what? That doesn't happen here. That's not going to happen here. That's not going to happen to me. I'm this, I'm that. And, kind of the same thing with the fighting. Well, I'm just, I street fight. Just same thing. I was like, I'm a street fighter and all this stuff. That wouldn't work. All that, all that stuff is just a barrier to it. And when reality hits in, you understand that it's the real deal. You get. I think for me, that's always been the biggest item. Hey, I need to make sure I'm trained. I make sure I'm doing this. I owe it to, I have some really close friends that I work with, guys that I'm on the team with, and things, and I owe it to them to try to be the best that I can, and things. So even if I'm not doing it for myself, I'm doing it for the other person. And I think when officers realize that, because they may not care as much about themselves, but most people want to get home to see their kids. Most people want to get home to see their wife. Most people want to be able to call their mom. Most people want to be there for their friends. Most people don't want their friend's death to be on their hand. There's so many things that can go from there. And like I said, I'm not talking shit about anybody, but they're for me, they're really strong motivators. So
yeah, absolutely. My mind goes to several places. One being, remember your purpose. Like, keep perspective. Just thinking about 3 P's earlier, and it was purpose, passion, perspective. But yeah, there's people depending on you, and literally your job. If you want to show up and be able to do your job, it's going to be a very critical moment at any moment, where you might have to perform at your best physical and mental ability. Right? Like, hope is not a plan. You do fall to the level you're training. You're not going to rise to the occasion, like they say. And then the cop funeral thing's a real thing. And even to recognize, there's the line of duty deaths, which we should pay. We should take a moment, reflect, learn from them, pay respects, but also just for the folks that, they have a cardiac at work, or they have a stroke, or, they have a heart issue, and then they survive. But a lot of those can be mitigated with fitness and proper stress management, better sleep, better nutrition. And just to bring it all back to the whole approach, it's just, hey, what are we doing to just show up our best?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
All right. Well, I appreciate your guys' time. Any closing thoughts before we sign off?
Go out there and
appreciate
train.
You guys. Yeah.
That's about it.
All right. Well, appreciate you both for hopping on all the rescheduling. It's a pleasure. And for those listening in, thanks for being part of the first, more than 2 people podcast. So we got 3 in, and who knows what kind of mayhem may endure afterwards. So thanks again for tuning in. Be sure to share us out, and take care.